huge success, and then was followed in the year 2000 by another seminar called Take Diving 2000, and it's together with the Baltic Sea Technical Divers. So another 6 years has gone by, and then it's time for another conference. And I'm not sure about you, but I'm really excited, and I know I will have a lot to learn from the speakers, and I hope you too will too. That's all I was going to say, and I'd like to hand over to our moderator, Fred Hocker.
I know hardly any room, actually. I recognize two people from the Cronin project that I've worked with before, Oscar and Hocker. But otherwise, I'm one of those fortunate few who actually gets paid to dive. So the kind of diving I do would seem pretty childish, I think, to most of you. It's in largely structured environments, set up for long-term projects at not very great depths. Almost all of my diving's been done at depths of less than 40 meters. In fact, I've dived twice to more than 36 meters. However, I do enjoy it, and it's a bit like commuting for me because I enjoy what I can do underwater, which I think is something that applies to everybody here. So it's a great pleasure for me to be here and to be able to be the moderator for this meeting. It's also a chance for me to become much more familiar with the technology and the physiology of diving, which is something that interests me both personally and professionally. Currently, I work here in Stockholm. I'm the Director of Research at the Boesmansgat Museum. And so my diving currently is limited to being a volunteer on the Cronin project for a couple of weeks every summer. My last dive, in case you're interested, was in the pool, the dry dock in front of the Boston Museum to fix the fountain. I had to get fully geared up for that, and then got in trouble with my boss because I'm not supposed to be diving on the company's time. Nobody else wanted to fix the fountain. I have a couple of announcements to make about the program. Those of you who have the conference materials, we actually have 3 cancellations of speakers who were on the program for various reasons. Tom Mount cannot be here. He has an ear problem that prevents him from flying and has a ear. And Mark Andrews, who was going to be here, could not be here because he's doing a buddy recovery in Davos. And Reinhard Bucheli, for personal reasons, can't be here, but one of his team, Michelle Volkanov, will be giving the presentation in his place. Tom Mount and Mark Andrews' slots will be taken on the program by Åke Larsson, who will give a rebreather workshop tomorrow morning, and we'll tell you more about that later. And then I was asked to give a talk about a project I directed in Turkey that is about as technical as I've ever had the chance to be, but involved repetitive decompression diving over a 12-week season and nitrox. That might be of interest. I've also been asked to announce that there are still some t-shirts that need to be bought at the registration desk, and there are a few tickets for tonight's dinner still available. So please avail yourself of that opportunity. I would ask all of our speakers, please try to keep to your time. We've set up the program so that each speaker has 45 minutes for the presentation. That leaves 15 minutes for discussion and questions. I'll be sitting in the front. I'll let you know when you have 5 minutes left. And in 1 minute, you will hear this sound. Except it will be coming from this bottle. If you finish, you get the beer. If you don't finish, I get the beer. The object is not to get me drunk before lunch. Okay? So, all should go well. Our first presentation this morning, and we're even slightly ahead of schedule. How about that? Are there any questions about the organization of the program or any of the technical aspects of the meeting? I'll have to ask Eric to answer this. Look for anyone in a black t-shirt that says crew on it if you have questions. They can help you out and direct you where the restrooms are, and if you need any facilities here, so they can help you much better than I can. Our first presenter is Don Shirley, who runs INTD in Southern Africa. I asked him what he wanted me to say about him. He said, "I'm just a technical diver." And he will talk to us about the Boesmansgat Expedition in Southern Africa. Don?
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for being invited. I'm going to talk to you about the Boesmansgat Expedition, which was a very public expedition. The reason being that it was actually a body recovery that we were going to do, and it caught the attention of the media in South Africa and generally around the world. So as a consequence of that, as things started to unfold on the dive, everyone knew about it straight away. So it's probably one of the most public diving incidents that's actually happened. And hopefully for the next 4 or 5 minutes, I get my reward, I'll tell you all about the expedition, where Boesmans is, and actually show you various clips of the dive itself, and talk about questions. Dave and I, in a chamber, posing for pictures. Because this was such a public event, and because it was the body recovery, we had quite a lot of support there. There was 30 to 35 people actually involved with the whole project. We had to have quite a lot of support because it was a working dive as such, because we were doing the body recovery and the police were involved. It was classed as a crime scene and all that sort of thing. As far as the dive team goes, the actual divers that were in the water were all rebreather divers. Dave Shaw, these are all target depths you see by the names there. Dave Shaw was aiming at 270, which is where the body was. I was Dave Shaw's next support at 220. Above that we had a couple of divers at 150, and then 100 and 80, and then the shallow support divers from 50 metres up. And on the surface, we had a lady that had completed the world record, 220 metres at Boesmans in the previous October. So she actually understood what was going on in the water. Not a rebreather diver, but everyone else was on rebreathers. There's the team there. Dave at the front, and that's basically the order of the divers as they went in the water. All the gas you see there was actually for decompression, for medical purposes, not for actual use on the dive. Because it was all rebreather, we actually used very, very little gas. Okay, where's Boesmans? It's 6 hours from Joburg if you go west. So it's quite a trek. It really is a true expedition. There's nothing there. Everything that you use, you take with you, including a shovel for the ablutions. So it's a very basic place to operate. That is quite the charm of the whole thing. So it's quite a drive. From where I live, it's a 9-hour drive. We've been there probably about 10 times now, 5 times with Dave as well. So it's a trip we make quite often. There's Boesmans itself. A very big hole. If you took the Eiffel Tower and stood it on the bottom, then the point would be about on the roof. So you get an amazing feeling when you're actually at the roof, which is 60 metres, that you're over a huge space. So if you drop something, you don't see it again. It's gone. So you always want the buoyancy control and wings and everything to be solid. When you go in, it's actually a small slot, and you go through one of 3 slots. And when you're in there, you look up, and it's like being in space, and you're looking at 3 moons in the sky. It's actually an incredible hole. Sheer size, and as you go past 50 metres, then you don't see any more light. It's complete darkness. And as I say, it's a complete void. You don't really see anything other than the line in front of you if you're not actually on the sides of the cave. This is a small video clip. This just gives you an idea of the area. So it's called Boesmansgat. This is an area where Bushmen live. The hole itself, about 50 metres directly down there in the open. And down. It was actually a soluble dolomite. So what we're saying there is the roof collapsed around about 2 million years ago, and all the boulders formed in a chute. It's very clear water, crystal clear water. You get this duckweed on the surface which you need to take off every time you go down. And so the hole itself is inhospitable to get down to. So it's 50 metres down, but it's about a 120 metre walk, carrying gear over rough ground to actually get down to the bottom. If you look at these two pictures, you can see a truck on the side, an articulated truck. Now that truck actually had the decompression chamber in. So the decompression chamber was right on site. And that decompression chamber belonged to the police, which is the bonus of actually having the police there. All previous dives that we've done had no decompression chamber available. And the nearest chamber was in Pretoria, which was basically a 6-hour drive away, or even quite a long helicopter trip. So whenever you dive there, you're actually in extreme conditions as far as anything going on. So you tend to make sure everything goes right and have all the backup that you possibly have it there available. Another view as we're starting to walk down. This is probably about 25 metres down in height. You can see a little man there walking along, gives you the idea of the scale of the place. So it's soluble dolomite, so it's actually very, very beautiful stuff to see. At the bottom, it's actually quite a small hole. Obviously, with a lot of gear down there, it gets quite busy. And with the divers as well, so you're actually trying to find little spots for you to work. This is right near the water's edge here. There's us getting into the water. The top shot there is just before we went down on one of the main dives. You can see all the flags in the background, which really represented the countries that was actually involved with this. Dave himself was an airline pilot, flew the big Airbuses and things like that, which actually brought him to South Africa quite a lot. And he would land, come and hire a car, get a driver, and he'd come to my dive site and get straight into the water, dive for a couple of days, get out the water, and then go back to the airport, wait 24 hours and fly again. So actually came quite a lot. You can see some of the silt on the top of the water there before it's big. This is down in the hole. You can see how clear that water is. And I know you're operating here in quite cool water. This water is sitting around about 16 degrees. So it's actually very nice. Now this gives you an idea of the hole itself. This was taken about a month ago. This gives you an idea of what the hole looks like. A couple of divers, these guys are both using inspirations. You see how big the void is. If you're on the sides, this is what you see. Very difficult to tie lines off on.
The hands for scale, right?
Yeah. This is just in the entrance area, really. They're in about the 40-metre range. Once you've gone past the 40-metre range, you start to hit the roof, or hit where the roof starts to come in. And the roof really is about 60 metres, so you've got a huge area at 60 metres which you can actually explore. See how pretty that is? The entrance pool, you've got to be careful of the entrance pool because it does knock down silt if you move around too much. There's Dave on one of the previous dives. He was using a Mark 15 for all his diving. You might ask why he actually went to do this recovery. It's probably best to actually let Dave speak for himself on this. So this is a video clip of when Dave did the earlier dive in October. See, I've moved that hand and now I can't find it again. This is the October dive when Dave found the body.
So how are you feeling now, though?
Yeah, I'm alright. I got started to get cold in the last year. But I just had a look around and saw which way had the steepest slope. I went down there, clipped on the line, ran the line. Sort of having a look as I was going. Wasn't very steep. And I saw the body over to my left. So that immediately changed the priority of the dive. I've got to admit that in a way it was, oh grief, there's the end of the dive. I would have thought that went through my mind because I wanted to go in the direction I was going because it was going deeper. But of course the priority was to go and see if I could recover the body.
Question, of course, is it feasible to recover the body?
Oh yes, it's definitely feasible. The only reason why I didn't recover it on this dive is because it wasn't part of my plan. So if it didn't happen very easily, it's not a wise thing to do to start making dramatic changes, exerting yourself unnecessarily. Whereas with some planning, I think it is a very likely and should be a relatively simple operation. The equipment and the team for recovering the body has to be very carefully considered. The rebreather is the way to go. And the reason for that is really obvious when you do the sums. On open circuit, at those depths, we're talking 28 atmospheres, of depth. And every breath is going to be a huge quantity of gas. So if you compared it to a standard recreational cylinder, which is a 12-litre cylinder, and I carry 4 of those just for bailout on the bottom, one of those tanks will last 4 minutes only. So if you have someone down there with open circuit, the logistics of the gas are just huge. And the limitations are just so immense that it's not a practical proposition. Whereas diving with the rebreather, very practical, because you obviously still have to carry the bailout gas, but if you fall into that situation where something goes wrong, you need to bail out, you immediately head for the surface. Whereas with an open circuit diver planning on going down there to do work on the bottom and breathing a gas, the quantities are so huge it's impractical.
I find myself in this beautiful location once again in January 2005 so that I can repeat the world record dive in an attempt to recover Dion Dreher's body so that the Dreher family can finally put closure to this very sad chapter.
So that was the dive in October. What Dave was doing there was literally just going down to explore the bottom of Bushman's. That's what's actually got lost in all of this hype about the body recovery and stuff like that. He went down 260 metres and then took a reel and started reeling out. actually aiming to explore. Most guys that dive on these deep dives go down and bounce and turn around and come back. What we was actually doing was actually exploring, and that's got forgotten in the fact that we found the body. We actually did that dive directly after Verna did her 220-metre dive, and we did it very, very casually. We used the backup dive for Verna, where we went to 150 to hang our cylinders. And then a couple of days later, Dave went down and did the 2-centimetre dive, and I was doing his backup at 150 at that stage. So it was a very casual dive, and we had shallow backup, but I was with Dave from 150 upwards. So that was the first 2-centimetre dive. As far as the equipment goes on this dive, I was using an Inspiration with hammerhead electronics. Hammerheads to allow me to get deeper. We've done dives previously where we lost the buzzers at 180, so hammerhead was the next choice. Hammerheads were filled with liquid as well, so it allowed them to take the pressure. Stages, there's just a few stages in the water. Obviously with the rebreathe you've still got to have the barrel-out cylinders. So there's some of them. 37 cylinders, I think. Dave's Mark 15, modified again with the hammerhead electronics, oil filled. It used them to 270 and it wasn't a problem. Cylinders, all the cylinders were pumped before we went. So I spent about 4 days mixing gas before we actually went on site. We were actually on site for 7 days. All the cylinders, all the helium there was a donation from Afrox. So they actually gave us the medical backup cylinders. The chamber was there ready, and it was running on a Comax 30 table if there was a problem. So we actually had all the gas available. Mixing, you can see the cylinders, that's after a day's diving, rebreather diving, so all we're doing is filling 3-litre cylinders, all the rest is still down at the hull. As far as the setup dives went, the first day that we went there, Dave and I went down to 150 and put the cylinders in. That was where the deepest cylinders were to actually do the dives. Following after that, all the dive teams started to do their dives and trial runs. So the whole week was actually about getting the whole team to function as a team. So the next day, the team started to dive, all the 7 divers I was talking about earlier, and they just dived and got orientated to the hole. The next day, they dived to their program depth. The next day, they dived on what we call dive time, which is from when Dave dived, and a certain time I had to go, a certain time I had to go, a certain time I had to go. So we practiced all of that run. In the roof, we had to put extra buoyancy to hold the lines from the cylinders. Those big lines were left in there from the previous time in the October, so everything was in place. That's Dave coming back from one of the dives. One of my favourite pictures, because if you look in the corner, there's that frog. So there's 2 frogs in there. There's Dave coming out after one of the dives. The police team. Now, as I said, the police had to be involved with this because it was a crime scene, and there was an element of diving work, though we were a separate team from the police. To make sure that everything was covered. So this is a meeting that we had with the police. There's police dive teams, there's lawyers, the health and safety at work people, all that sort of stuff. So that had to be sorted out. The police actually fulfilled a great function as well, in that they kept the press at bay, because this was a huge media event. It had been on the TV in South Africa that this was happening. There were press at the gates. Everyone was claiming the stories, it was front page in newspapers, all because of the fact that the body was found originally, which made the news, and then everything went on from there. The bottom corner there is the police giving a briefing to the press. We had a press day, and they came in on the Friday before the dive, and that was a rest day for all the divers. So, you know, they really kept them at bay. And without the police, we wouldn't be able to keep the people out. We had a rescue team, organised a mine rescue team. Because of the distance from the bottom of the water up, it's a hell of a job to carry someone out that had a problem. So you've got a 50-metre slope, so they put in mine rescue stuff, and really did a great job. On the Friday, we actually did practice calls and things like that. So everything was rehearsed for this dive, all the way through. Media. We were actually making a documentary at the same time. Dave wore this helmet with the head cap, so we could actually video everything that was going on. And that actually, you'll see this some of the film later, that actually showed us exactly what went on with Dave's dive as well. The awkward thing with the head cam, we don't normally wear helmets. One problem is that with the light that we use on our hand, we couldn't put it around the head. And that was a mistake. So that's one of the things that caused the problem later, which I'll talk about as we go. Briefings, every night there was a briefing telling everyone what was going on the next day, and it involved everyone. We had doctors on site also, so we had the whole team there. Everyone knew what was happening from day to day. Dive planning. Well, you can imagine the amount of planning that went on for a dive like this. As far as the dives themselves, all divers were responsible for their own plan. So I didn't tell anyone what they had to do. I didn't tell anyone how fast they had to move. We established that on various practices and then actually incorporated that into the dive itself. As far as the diving went, everyone was operating as part of the team, but operating on their own at the same time. This is our dive time as things went. Dave would go, and our time would start at 0, that was about 6 o'clock in the morning. 13 minutes later I would go with the aim of meeting Dave at 2:20. 23 minutes later we would actually meet. Mark and Dushan would then go with the aim of meeting us at 1:50. Then at 45 minutes Peter would go. Then Peter would meet me at 80 metres, at which stage I'd have the body if we actually managed to get the body off the bottom. And then Lowe would go, and then the police guys would go with the idea of actually picking up the body from Peter, who would then pass it on. And then Steve would go, and there was a couple of other divers after that. Now the whole idea was a rolling support. So there was a lot of divers in the water, and they were all passing each other, all up one line. So although in some elements we were solo, most of the time there was divers in the water, and if everything went to plan exactly, we'd all be passing each other up and down. So there'd always be someone around in the water that could assist if there was anything wrong. And everyone's function was to look after everybody else as they went through. And we had briefings beforehand which basically said, look, if there's a problem with the dive, the body doesn't matter, because it's the actual people that are alive that actually really matter. So that was a briefing. Also, David said, we all said basically, if there's a problem with us and we don't come back, then that's the end of the story. That's where we stay and no one brings us back. No one attempts to bring us back, and we're happy to stay on. And that was openly discussed and stated. Now, as far as coming back then, the team effectively broke up into 2 parts, where one was dealing with the body and one was dealing with the support of the divers. So you can see how things went there. Mark and Dushan were waiting at 1:50 to come back, or to assist us come back and take the cameras and all that sort of stuff, and the bodies. And if that had gone to plan, and the timing was right, then there would have been this cover all the time. Right, so this is the day of the dive, and here we're getting ready to go. As I say, we worked on dive time. David come in from Australia, from Hong Kong, and he was on a different time zone, so we always worked very early, and we needed to go because 6 o'clock in the morning, and we're potentially in the water for 12 hours, so we needed the daylight to come out, and we wanted a little bit of warmth. So that's when the time started. This is the dive itself. See how awkward that camera is. Quite awkward going through the slot. Just passing on some of the cylinders hanging in the wall. And now it's coming to the bottom. That's his cave reel where he reeled on. That's me starting my dive now. Okay, so I started my dive. Dave was already on the bottom. Dave died at about 20 minutes into the dive, so he was dead before I actually got anywhere near. Now, as I was going down at 150, I realised that there was a problem, because at that stage I should have started to see the ascent bubbles coming from Dave as he was coming up. So I decided then that I would carry on and go down, which was one of the plans. That's my plan B. So I had the gas, I had the plans, and I was going to carry on down to Dave, even though he'd actually said, you know, unless I signal, don't come down. But when you can see the light, then you go down. So I carried on. Roughly about 2:40, maybe 2:45, I heard a crack, and that was the controller. So that was my controller that was giving me the gas. So then I had a little bit of a problem on my hands. So I had to control manually. So I slowed the ascent, slowed it up. It was about 250 when I stopped. And now I've got the other monitor which actually tells me what's going on. So I add oxygen. Fun thing is that when you add oxygen at that depth, it's one little squirt is a hell of a lot of gas. So straight away I was on about 2.5 bar, which wasn't that quite healthy. So at that stage I went to open circuit. Very natural thing for me to do. There was no real element of panic in it. You know, it's just one of the things you do. I've done it a million times. Open circuit, Scuba Pro regulators, 250 metres, breathe like a dream. So I was quite impressed with that. But you can always see the needle move as you breathe. So obviously I turned the dive and then started coming up. Came back onto the loop, stabilised the loop, and carried on up. And then I had to pick a run time. because I'd obviously gone past the depth that I had. I had all of Dave's run times. The only run time that actually fit in the situation I was in was Dave's shortest 270 metre profile. So I just followed that one. Again, adding gas levels coming up all the time, moving up, looking what's going on, following the slate, and working my way out. Sport divers were at 150. They'd overstayed their time by 5 minutes, and they left, which was exactly what I'd wanted them to do anyway. I carried on up. I got to cylinders, and the idea was to actually pick cylinders up as we went past, to change cylinders, also to flush. Actually flushed as well with different gases. And gradually worked my way out past all the cylinders. I met my first support diver at 120 metres, which was Peter, who should have stayed at 100, but he carried on through. And at that stage, I told him that there was a problem. That's the support divers on the top. That's Peter, the guy with the long hair, waiting to go. Right. Now, obviously, the communications is slow. So, if you're thinking timelines, at 80 minutes, the police divers who should have been there to take the body actually came up and said there's no lights below. And so, they didn't have Dion, nothing had actually happened. Dion was a guy that had died 10 years previously, which Dave was down to pick the body off. Then, after an hour and a half, they got the first slate up, which was one that I wrote. Oh no, sorry, this is the Mark and Dushan passing their slates up. So they're saying, we're at 150, there's only one light below, we don't know whether it's Dave or Don, we waited there 6 minutes. So now the surface know there's something going on, so that started to kick in the support plans. Obviously everyone started to get a bit worried on the surface. The lady and the man on the left is actually the parents of the guy that died in 10 years ago, Deandre. So then they got the slate up from me, which was passed all the way up, saying Dave's not coming back. So they knew now I was okay, but Dave had a problem. I don't think I'm going to get one of these. Okay, so also then came up, which I wrote at the same time, saying I've got one VR3 down. I had two VR3s. And I was actually, the profile I was actually running then was a cross between the plan that I'd made and the VR3's plan. So I was basically trying to bring down the fast loading on myself, and the VR3 was giving me a similar profile to what the dive plan had. It would give me an extra hour, and I was prepared to accept that. So that's 66 minutes into my dive, I actually wrote that. So at that time the VR3 was telling me I had 600 minutes left. Okay, what happened then? Basically I carried on up and everything was fine. I got to 50 metres, and one of the support divers, because I was meeting people all the time, one of the support divers actually came to me and wanted to give me a VR3 to replace the one that wasn't working, just to give me another timer device. I put that on. And I think during that time I got distracted. So I can't really remember that much about that period, but I think I got distracted, and I think I didn't add oxygen as much as I should have done. I don't know. He left, and then I came up to the roof. That was probably a bad move, he should have stayed with me. But he left, I came up to the roof, which is 46 metres. At that stage, I started to pass out. It's just like going to sleep, you just start to go. So natural reflex to go for the open circuit. I had open circuit there, which was 1935. So it was a gas that was breathable. It was the right gas, similar gas to what I had in the rebreather, or should have been similar gas to what I had in the rebreather. That knocked me sideways, spinning like a top. So, and that was both mentally and physically spinning. You can see me there. This obviously isn't at time because there's no one there, holding onto the line. It was half-inch thick line, which was a saving because that was my only reference. I span along the line, along the roof, and there was a coil of rope, and I was conscious of the fact there was a coil of rope, and it's like being in a dream with everything spinning. And I came up to 40 metres, and at that stage, I looked at the VR3, I was focused enough to actually see what was going on and knew that I shouldn't be there. looked at the gauge, and then decided I'd go back down again because the thing told me to go. So I went back down through the coil of rope to where the cylinders were. Then the nausea got much worse. I was throwing up all the time. The spinning got worse. Everything I did made me vomit. And I picked up extra cylinders, clipped those off because I knew I needed them, and then carried on out. Then at 40 metres, I met the next diver coming through, one of the sport divers, and then that's what I wrote. That's what I actually wrote on the slate. Having a bad time, nausea and vertigo. So I was there, but actually didn't really want to be there. But yeah, I was in full survival mode. So at no time did I ever think that I wasn't coming out. It was just a case of this is what I had to do next. This was about 2 hours into the dive, and I still had, the dive was 12 hours long. So I had to cope with that all the way through. All the guys were in supporting me all the way through. So at no time then was I on my own. They clipped me off on the line, which irritated the hell out of me because I couldn't move. And I couldn't bring my legs up. Normally you'd decompress horizontally. Couldn't bring my damn legs up. Every time I tried to pull them up, it made me spin. I asked the divers to bring my legs up. Every time they did that, I literally span and I was upside down, and it was really, really strange. And it got to the stage, imagine you're in that vertical position the whole time, it got to the point where I couldn't breathe because I didn't physically have the energy to drag the gas down to the bottom of my lungs. So I was actually purging to breathe. So every time I wanted to breathe, I'd purge. Every time I needed to write, I had to write in between breaths and hold my breath and miss a breath so I could actually write something. So the world wasn't that great, but again, it was just a survival thing. What do I do next? You think of the next thing all the time. Obviously the guys on the surface running around, they're now going to be in the water much longer than I thought. Again, we breathe as a saviour of the day because it's so easy to regas, so easy to get back in the water. Eventually I got back up to 6. And there they sent a message down from the doctor saying, you know, come out at 7:30. And my reply to that was, well, what time is it? Because I haven't got a clue what time it is. My time existed in what it said in minutes to coming out. Now at that stage I still had 30 minutes by the VR3 at 6 metres, and then another 30 minutes at 3 metres on the VR3. But I knew that my run time on my tables would have got me out already. But I said, no, I'm not going to come out now. I'm going to stay and I'm going to do another 30 minutes, finish the 6 metres, and then I'll come up. So I said, no, I'm not coming up. Right, and then towards the end of the time, I started to get a pain in my leg. But I wasn't sure at the time whether it was anything to do with decompression or whether it was the fact I just couldn't use my legs. So, you know, all the time they were just dangling below me, so it's a pain. So I asked them then if the chain was ready, and that's exactly what I wrote on the slate. And then we came up, unclipped everything so I could get out of the water easily, and they basically took me out. When I got to the surface, we had full medical support on the surface, drips, the whole thing. So straight on the drip, within 22 minutes I was hoisted up the rock face and put in the chamber. I stayed there for the next 7.5 hours. So I started diving at 6 o'clock in the morning and came out of the chamber about 3 o'clock in the next morning. So quite a long day, and all I had to eat was one little piece of chocolate holder. The doctor was worried about CNS because I've been in the water so long and I've obviously taken a lot of oxygen. Towards the very, very end of the chamber treatment, I got the first signs of any decompression, any CNS problem, which was just a little bit of vomiting, not much. So, you know, a hell of a lot of dose I actually had. Came back to 30 in the chamber. Media, all over the place, absolutely all over the place. This stage, when I came out of the chamber, I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand up. I was fine, but I couldn't do anything. My head wouldn't allow me to get up, it was like spinning. I had 10 treatments after that. And every treatment I got about 50% better. So in the end I could actually walk, but I couldn't walk without going sideways. Hell of a thing when you lose your balance. That's really coming up. So the media is all over us. So that was the end of my dive, as it were, and I was off getting treated. Obviously, after the dive, we had to get all the gear out. Most of the divers went, and that left the police and a couple of other guys to pick the police up. So all this stuff had to come out of the water. Now, all the ropes were still in. Peter and another reserve guy came in, and they held a little service on the water, and then they went down to pull the lines out. Now, I'd hoped that there would be something attached to the line. Just remember, the body actually had a reel attached to it, and Dave was down there. Now, we didn't know what was happening. It was all conjecture. There was lots of rumours going around and stuff like that. So, at the time when they pulled the body up, I said, go down and put buoys on 100 metres and blow the buoys so to bring the line up. Because we still had cylinders at 150, so had cylinders everywhere. No cylinders were moved down. So they blew the buoys up, brought the whole thing up, and as the thing came up, the divers didn't see it at the time, but the bodies drifted up behind them. So the bodies came up to the roof. Obviously, the line pulling actually pulled Dave up, and the buoyancy that Dave had in his BC and that pulled everything up. And attached to Dave was Deal. What had happened was the line had got caught around the line, and that's what stopped him from coming up. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But that is what actually attached, that line being attached is the thing that brought Deal up as well. So he actually achieved what he wanted to do, and now we had Dave back. So the bodies were out, and I was pleased that that was the end of it. And now we actually might know what was going on, because Dave had the head cam. As far as the cylinders go, these are all cylinders coming in. There's the divers on the surface there. These are the two guys that are actually dealing with everything. Body coming out. This is the body of the guy that died 10 years ago. Now, people couldn't tell us what the body was going to be like. Everyone was instant experts after the fact, but at the time they couldn't tell us. They'd been down there 10 years, asked the top pathologists, what's it going to be like? Might be some flesh, but bones. So we were most concerned about losing the bones, because the whole thing falling apart on the way up. When the thing came up, it was a complete body. It was soapified, absolute complete body. So that's what made the whole thing light when it's in the water, as you see in them. There's the guy's cylinders. He was on a 70-metre air dive with unmanifolded twins, aluminium cylinders. Basically passed out at 70 metres and went down. He still had about 150 bar in both cylinders, according to the crusher gauges. Dave's rebreather coming up. Obviously this, again, the media was all over us, and Dave's head cam found its way to the newspapers, to film people. So at the same time as I was trying to get my treatment sorted out, I was trying to stop the thing from being aired, and I actually went and did various talkovers and things so they didn't, or control the situation. Now, this is 4 minutes long. This is the actual video with me talking over. It's a little bit dark, but you can see
the rope is actually pulled by the line that he laid in the October. So the moment you see the line, small cable line going off, there we are.
And now he's got the bag out, so he must be approaching the body.
Now he's reached the body.
That's the legs.
You see the legs there. Getting the bag ready to put over the legs. Nice check, everything's under control. Bit of silk that we'd expect something like that. And now looks like Dave's got the bag on the legs. Okay, but now there seems to be something wrong because everything is moving, and you can see that line is in the water all over the place. So the line's all twisted up there. The whole body appears to be moving now, which is exactly not what was to be expected. And the cylinders should be embedded in the mud, but now they're floating freely. That's the arm. Nowadays, trying to deal with this floating body, the bag won't go any further, it won't go over the cylinders. Now the line's everywhere, you can see it's caught on the light there. The whole body is floating. This must be very disorientating at this stage. Untangling his light there. He'd normally wear the light on his hand. Now he's got the scissors out and he's going to cut the line. Now he's actually slipped. It's a very sloping bottom, so he's slipped off and fallen backwards. You can see the light there still. Having a quick check just to see what the time is. Deciding whether he should leave now or how much time he's actually got. So everything's rushed now. You see that bag loose. It's working with the light from the headlamp here. The cylinders are floating around, the line is everywhere. That's the end of the reel. And now he's leaving the body. That's exactly the amount of time that he intended to spend on the body, so he's decided that he must leave at this point. That's where he then starts to get tangled in the line, and he's working with the line trying to cut it. As he goes along, he's still trying to cut the thing, and he gathers all the line up in his hands, but he's firmly held by the line. The scissors just cut, and he's not actually doing anything. It's just going through the motions. He carries on trying, but then just stops and the tape goes quiet. That's the end of the dive for Dave.
That's the guys on the surface just after the body out. Quite a sobering video. People are always asking what actually went wrong. No one thing you could actually say is wrong, just a whole pile up of events. The lights obviously got tangled up. The body was floating, it shouldn't have been floating, it should have been in the mud. The cylinders were fixed, it was going to cut the body out of the cylinders. The cylinders, with the body floating around, there was a line all over the place, which was already identified as a major problem. The fact that the line wasn't around his head, where it would be when he was working normally, was a major problem. And he got caught up. So actually getting caught up then exasperating the whole problem with the CO2. That's where he stayed. If he hadn't got caught up in the line, then he would have made it out. He would have got back to the line and it would come up and everything would have been normal. So we've actually seen what went on with him. Also from my side, obviously I had my dramas on the way back up, but dealt with all the dramas on the way through. What went wrong? As far as my side goes, I had an ear problem, so a mechanical diffusion style problem. I think it was going from rebreather to open circuit, so I had a high differential pressure there straight off. It was theoretically the same gas, it might not have been because of maybe the oxygen wasn't where it should have been. So that knocked me sideways. Maybe the eustachian tube on this side still had gas in that was different from what I was actually breathing. And with the relaxed breathing of the rebreather, it might have opened the tubes, whereas the open circuit straight away opened everything up. So it's quite an episode, quite a lot of things that went wrong and were dealt with, and the team actually worked quite well. What you mustn't take away from it also is the fact that the team itself did some extraordinary dives in their own right to actually fulfill all this function. Okay? Maybe we'll leave some time for some questions. And I didn't get my beard. No, I didn't hear the click either. Okay. Yeah.
Don, what were your bailout?
For some reason the slide didn't appear on there.
I mean, you had to have a couple of different contingencies.
Just a few, yeah. At the bottom we had 480. At 150 we had 1070. At 80 we had something 65. So all the way up we had cylinders that were actually breathable. The thing you've got to watch out for when you're breathing the high heliums on a rebreather is when you come off onto something else. You can't just take it for granted that you're actually on the bottom with this gas. So I couldn't dive with 1080 and then switch to 1080 anywhere in the dive because it'll blow your head off. You need to have something that's what is in the loop. And we actually went through that, and all of the cylinders were no more than 10% different from what we're actually breathing. So we're prepared to take a 10% jump on the helium as we went through. The only thing maybe we should have had was a little bit of helium in the 50%. We had 20% helium in the 50%, but for some reason we didn't do it on that side. But then again, we never really thought we was going to use the 50%, which is not a good excuse. But
so you had these jumps so that you were essentially matching what, 6 or 7 levels up, or
yes.
How many levels up?
Yeah, it was. We had 150, 100, 150, 80, 50, and then the surface. I've got, it's on the notes that I've printed out. So,
I'll catch you.
That's the important thing, is that there's lots of cylinders there. That's one thing you've got to think about if you're doing deep diving with high heliums. You must have the gas tank. I never ever assume that the gas you've got on your side will do. Never say, oh, I've got this, it'll work all over the place. It won't. You need, when you're saturated, you need to actually get the right gas.
What was your nesting time, you and Dave, from the surface to the bottom?
It's as came up there, it's about 11 minutes to the bottom. About a 25 metre a minute drop.
Why did the team choose to actually bring the body from diver to diver up to the surface instead of perhaps attaching it to a line and then pulling it up or using it?
That's something we talked about. The thing was, that was plan A. If everything would have worked, if the body was easily moved, it was in the bag, that was great. What we didn't want was to bring basically a wetsuit up that used to have bones. Remember, we didn't know what was actually there. So we wanted to get the thing up. And it was simple enough to pass it from diver to diver. Not all the team were involved in the body. But the plan was, if something went wrong, or it was just too awkward, we just clip it off the line and then bring it up. So that was plan A. Plan B was to leave it clipped off. Plan C was just to bring the head up, because the police wanted to identify the body. As it was, the head actually stayed there. You saw the mask. That mask is actually attached to the head. My head fell off. Must be some more.
When planning an operation like this, was in-water communication in between the divers something you discussed?
No, we didn't worry about in-water communication in terms of verbal stuff. We were very used to operating silently, and the slates were a method of passing information backwards and forwards. The reality is that you can only deal with the thing in front of you, so even if the surface knew, which eventually they did, it didn't make any difference what was going on underwater.
What was your bottom VO2 for the set point?
1.3. but I didn't actually get to the bottom. So yeah, going down, I just ran it on about a 1.1, and then it would have been switched at the bottom to then just come up on a 1.3, pushing on a 1.6 on various stops and things like that.
What about huge dives to the different depth?
We saw the video of that, that video where you saw the underwater sequence. That was a dive that we did.
And what are the authorities you on?
Oh, no, there's no problem with diving there. It's privately owned. It was just the fact that that body was there. It's the only death that's actually occurred at Boesmansgat itself, and obviously the other bodies are in. So there's no restriction on diving in Boesmans, and we have got trips planned. It's actually a beautiful place to go. And actually Shallow is a beautiful dive. Everyone that goes there wants to dive deep. And the shallow zone is actually quite pretty in that 40 metres area. And the lights coming through the roof. It's actually a pretty little place to dive. Strangely enough, I don't aim to dive deep. You know, it's not my mission to go off and set records. I wanted to do that, I've really done it. The only reason I go deep is because there's something there. It just happens that it's actually deep at the same time. So I'm trying to find the end of something, trying to look for something, trying to go down to a wreck. And so I don't dive deep. I don't say that people go dive deep. It's, you know, it has got its problems. So I'm really shallow by that.
Have you ever considered, when you discussed doing the dive, that you do it in a team of two, or why did you decide that he's on his own?
Yeah, basically, at the extreme depths, it's more of a problem. If something goes wrong, more likely to have two people dead than one. So that's why we decided that we do that. And we do, on the extreme dives, sometimes we do dive on our own. We prefer a team. We're not necessarily completely on our own. That part of the dive is on its own, but the support is quite deep and quite close. So, yeah, solo diving, you've got to have the right backup with you. And we're always carrying the cylinders, so that is your backup. Same way as when I had a problem, it was a case of, it's not a buddy that I would go to. I wouldn't want to go to someone to destroy their day, as it were. I shut the loop and go on to open surface. And you know, the limb tracks have got to be there. With rebreathers, the limb tracks must be there, and you must practice everything, because it will happen. And you've got to respect the machines.
How are you feeling today after the treatment?
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was diving happily. It was 6 months before I got back in the water again. Water, which I was very pleased with. I actually felt stabler in the water than I did on the land. Maybe because I could feel stuff on the outside. And you know, the deepest dive I've done since is 80-90 metres, the longest 2 hours. So I'm back into deep compression diving and doing the thing, and full-on teaching. When I first started teaching, I had a minder to make sure that I was fine, that it was purely diving to look after me, you know, just to make sure I was 100%. I felt okay, but you know, if there was something wrong, I could just hand the class over and up to that. So I sort of weaned myself back into it. But it is like being a butterfly with your wings pulled off. And you can't get in. It's actually a bad feeling when you think, well, maybe I'm not going to do this anymore. And extremes, I doubt whether I will do those sort of extremes again. But 120 is probably.
We have time for one more question, and there's a gentleman here, I think.
Yes, I have one question. It's regarding the equipment that you're using. Normally, it's not designed for this depth. And I would just like to know, how do you prepare the equipment to dive to this depth?
Right. Yeah, you're correct. The equipment, the inspiration itself is not for those depths. The Mark 15 is okay. As far as the inspiration goes, it's 100 metre rated by the manufacturer, tested to 160. Go past 160, the buzzer will implode. We imploded the buzzers at 180. So the buzzers will go. So then we modified it to a hammerhead and oil filled the hammerhead so that it would take the pressure. Dave's was full and happy. I had a problem with mine just before the dive, the day before the dive, want to change the batteries, so I had to go in and repair it, and in repairing it, I lost about half a teaspoon of oil, and that is what made the thing crack. So yeah, when you're doing these sort of dives, things do go. Pressure does come in. Gauges crush, so you can't actually read them anymore. Talking in code. So when you start to push the envelope, your equipment does start to fail. And it's something that you do gradually and learn what the equipment's actually doing. But the backup is the thing. You must have the backup. And that goes for any dive, whether it's a 20-metre dive or a 100-metre dive, you must have the backup. That was the last question.
Don, thank you very much. We'll take 2 minutes to swap over presentations, and our next group is starting 8, so don't go anywhere.